Hi, everyone. It's Kimber, the Study Abroad Specialist, here with this week's Study Abroad question of the week. And so for this week, we have a question from Danielle. And her question was, she wants to know, how many study abroad programs should I apply for? Now, I always like to just start out with the context of this. First of all, if you have not already submitted your question of the week, you can definitely do that by just clicking on the link that is in the Google form, either below if you're on YouTube or above if you're on Facebook. So definitely do that if you have a question that you want to have answered in this series. But one of the things I always like to express with study abroad is keeping in mind that there are basically two different tracks. Now, if you have been, on my videos and watching different things, you know that there are different types of study abroad programs, of course, but there's generally two different ones. So you have your short term, which are going to be either your Maymester, your summer, or your semester long programs. And those are going to be ones that just last for a short term. So typically 6 months or less. And then you have your long term, which are going to be your degree programs. And as someone who has done both of those, I just like to distinguish the difference, because I think a lot of times when maybe a student is thinking about applying for a full degree program, but they're just saying study abroad, it is definitely still study abroad, but there's a different context to that if you're trying to get a full degree program abroad versus just going for 6 months. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. You do what works best for you, but I just want to distinguish that. But specifically to her question, I wanted to just kind of walk through it. So one of the things that's going to be important, and we have talked about this on this channel quite a bit, is you want to think about what is your why for studying abroad? So what is going to be most important to you? Is it going to be location? Is it something where you're trying to fulfill different requirements, maybe for electives for your degree? What are you trying to accomplish while you're abroad? Because I always feel like that is going to be a great baseline for how you choose not only what programs you want to apply to, but also where you want to go and basically what you want to do while you're there. Do you want to just do a basic academic program? Do you want to do an internship? It runs the gamut, and so you can figure out that way. Now, in terms of how many programs you should apply to, I personally think that 3 to 4 is enough. I know that some people would say, oh, apply to 10, apply to 12. I have to be fully transparent here. When I was applying to my graduate programs in the UK and in different parts of Europe, I applied to 35 different programs. I'm a little bit crazy, and I got into 33 of them. So, and 2 of them were basically the reason why I didn't get in were because they wanted me to come at a different time, and I wanted to start in that fall semester. So technically I got into all of them, but 2 of them wouldn't have worked out. And ultimately I only chose 2 anyway, doing them back to back. But I just want to point out that that is a lot of programs, but that was for degree-based programs. So with degree-based programs, if that's something you're doing, I definitely want you to sort of take a step back and consider applying for maybe 5 to 7 of them, just because you want to have a wide range of options. But if you are taking the route that a lot of students take, where you're going to be applying to a semester-based program, or maybe it's a little bit shorter than a semester, maybe it's a Maymester or a spring semester or summer semester, something like that, then I think that 3 to 4 is good. Now, one of the things that I have really been trying to stress to students, particularly in 2022 and beyond, I think we all know why, is that you want to have some variety in where you apply. And I am definitely factoring in the fact that I know that, for example, there are some students that, they may have not gotten the jab, or, they may not want to be under certain restrictions. We are kind of coming into a place where a lot of that is going away, but who knows what that's going to look like, 2022, later in the year, and 2023 and beyond. And so, you want to make sure that you're keeping your options open where you're going to be applying. And since every different country is doing something different with all of this, and even once we're out of this, I would still kind of keep that in mind, because over the past 2 years, now that we've seen what can happen globally, that you want to just make sure that you're keeping your options open. And one of the things I think is going to be important is making sure that you are applying to programs in different places. Now, we all have sort of our dream place that we want to be. And so let's say that for you, you're interested in applying for 4 different programs. You know that 2 of them definitely have to be in Italy because that's where you want to go. But maybe one of them is in Florence, and then the other one is in Sicily, because again, those are two different, very different regions and two different places and lots of different things going on. But then you're going to apply for one that is based in China. And then your fourth one could be based, I don't know, maybe in South Africa, just so that you have a variety. And even outside of the scope of everything that has been happening since 2020, it's just thinking about giving yourself some flexibility, because again, all of these locations are going to be very different. So maybe location is important to you when you're studying abroad, but you're also going to have an opportunity to learn different things. So maybe you've definitely wanted to learn Italian culture. That's going to be important to you. So you go ahead and say that I definitely want to see if I'm going to be able to get into a program in Italy. And that way I'm going to put most of the weight on the programs in Italy. But then I've also thought maybe South Africa would be interesting to live in for a little while. So I'm going to apply for this program too. And at this point in the game, I don't think that it's necessarily important to rank them. Obviously, in your mind, you probably know which one, as we were saying before, if you really want to go to Italy, that's your first choice. But I think that you start out by actually seeing what you get into. And so you check and see like what you get into, go through the process for each of them, get accepted or rejected. And then you can sort of make that choice, because once you sort of go through that initial process of the application and you apply and you get your decision back, then it typically comes down to a few things. So the number one thing that most students focus on, and this is whether their parents are helping them or they are doing it themselves, is cost. So you're thinking about, let's say if you get into all 4 programs, then you're thinking about what is the overall cost going to be. And you have to remember, of course, with study abroad, that it's not just the actual cost of the program. That is the baseline of the cost, but you have to think about, are you going to have to supply your own housing? Or if not, how much is the housing going to cost? For a lot of students, they may have to get their own visa. How much is that going to cost? You have to get to and from the location. How much is that going to cost? And then your living expenses. This is something that we talk a lot about in my mini course that I launched last month, where I basically cover how you get started with your first month away. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely click down into the description below or above if you're in Facebook, and go ahead and access that. It's entirely free, but we are basically going through the different steps you're going to need to have a successful first month away for study abroad, and budgeting is a huge part in that. There's an entire module on that, so definitely check that out. But cost is usually the most important factor that people look at. It makes sense. As I always like to jokingly say, for Americans and students like me, like a study abroad program always seems like a bargain because our schools here are so expensive. But for a lot of students who may be studying abroad for the first time, and maybe you're coming from a country where education is free, or maybe it's much more affordable than a place like the US, and then you suddenly see this big number, you're like, what is this and how do I deal with it? I think that that's going to be really important to figure out. So cost is usually important. And then you also tend to go ahead and weigh what are the benefits of each program. So again, coming back to if you want to learn a language, or maybe there's one program that, it's not necessarily in the top place. So in this instance, it's not in Italy, but maybe in the South Africa program, you get to do an internship. Maybe that's something that's important to you. Those types of things typically are what come at the second tier of weighing out where you want to go. And so I always like to recommend 3 to 4 programs. If you want to be a little bit more ambitious and spread yourself out a little bit more, I would say maybe 6 programs max. But you have to remember that whether it be with a semester program or a degree program, and if you're crazy enough to apply to over 30 like I did, that it takes a lot of work. I mean, I spent a lot of time doing the essays, gathering the transcripts. I had to get each of those things for each application. And so it is a long endeavor, and most likely you're in school right now as well. So you want to just make sure that you're judicious with your time and using your time wisely. And you also want to just think about the fact of, if you get into, even 2 of the programs, that's going to be great because you still have a choice. And even if you just get into one of the programs, you can still decide, well, maybe I don't want to go now, or maybe I want to see what I can do to maximize it. Maybe if you're going in the summer, you can figure out, well, can I also go back maybe for another semester at a different time? So there's lots of different options out there. But typically, I always like to recommend students to just stick with 3 or 4. That's going to be a sweet spot for you, just ensuring that they are in different locations and that you have an opportunity to weigh and balance the difference between them. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that answered your question, Danielle. And then also too, for any other students watching, I hope that if you had that question, that answers it for you. As a reminder, as I said in the beginning of the video, if you have a question of the week, definitely click on the Google form and go ahead and submit your question. I would love to answer it in a future video. And also for study abroad students, if you are interested in getting some advising with me, I do offer advising sessions every single week. So if you just go to the link that is here on the screen, I also have it linked in the description as well. You can learn more about my advising program and we can get you going on that. With that being said, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.